Hi everyone, Becky Hosey here again, reporting on EULAR as part of the Go With Us. So we just got access to the on-demand library today of the entire conference, and it's so cool. This is my first time experiencing EULAR, and I'm so excited to be learning along with you. So let me share what I learned today. The first session I watched was titled New Targets and Treatments in Sjogren's Disease. Let me start by saying, as a person living with Sjogren's, it was great to hear firsthand from these leading world experts. If you or someone you know suffers from Sjogren's, then you understand all too well how misunderstood the disease actually is, even among medical professionals. So it was really vindicating that nearly all these experts use the terms dryness and fatigue as their hallmarks to describe the disease, because often the fatigue is not recognized or overshadowed by the dryness. So let's jump right in. The first presentation was on the 48-week trial results of a new drug called AiArthritis. And as you may or may not know, there is not one approved medication for the systemic symptoms of Sjogren's, but I'm here to give you hope because there are some promising medications in the near pipeline. So back to AiArthritis. This drug is a monoclonal antibody against a protein called CD40. CD40 has many functions, but I want you to think of its role as amplifying the immune response and one of the known culprits in Sjogren's and several other autoimmune type diseases. The drug AiArthritis blocks CD40 from being able to function. There is very promising data of its effectiveness in Sjogren's. For instance, in this study, for the first 24 weeks, participants either took the drug or a placebo, and there were significant differences for those taking AiArthritis. Then everyone took the drug up to 48 weeks, and they had good response really as a whole. And that's a big deal with medication testing, as you want to see those results because it means it's effective. Patients had decreased biomarker levels and improved salivary gland flow rates. There were dramatic changes with fatigue and dryness. Interestingly, there was only a slight difference in response with higher doses. This is a very promising drug that I think, once approved, will improve the lives of those living with Sjogren's. Another presentation was on a drug called Dasdalopine, or DAS. We'll go with DAS. This is also a CD40 inhibitor, but it isn't associated with blood clots like a lot of other medications in this class. I want to tell you, an audience member actually asked a question of the presenter from the drug AiArthritis, and he also said there were no reports of blood clots with that as well, so just to let him know. But anyways, back to DAS. It seems to reduce the overactive immune response in Sjogren's through affecting several different cells, so B cells, T cells, and other biomarkers. There was also a presentation on leflunomide and hydroxychloroquine, so maybe a lot of you are familiar with these medications. They're two DMARDs, disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drugs, but used in combination for this trial, specifically for Sjogren's patients, and there seemed to be a significant clinical benefit to using them both together. Another presentation, there was a drug called ianalumab, which inhibits B cell survival in Sjogren's and improves salivary gland flow. Interestingly, again, there were no significant differences with dose changes. Another drug, Rituxan, which many of you may be familiar with, which might be used for a variety of conditions, including RA, but it is used somewhat in Sjogren's because, as previously mentioned, there are no licensed therapeutics for primary systemic Sjogren's at this point. So a study looked at the long-term outcomes for repeat cycling with Rituxan in Sjogren's. The findings were actually that first cycle non-responders, or those that did not respond to the first cycle, didn't appear to respond to a second treatment, which was in contrast to RA, to rheumatoid arthritis. So that was interesting. Also, 1 in 6 Sjogren's patients lost responsiveness with repeated drug cycles. The presenter actually referred to this as the number 2, NDNR phenomenon, or secondary non-depletion and non-response phenomenon. Another presentation was on progressive interstitial lung disease, and the reporter stated that this condition in severity occurs as frequently in Sjogren's as it does other autoimmune conditions. He mentioned an urgent, and used that word urgent, need for early identification, treatment, and monitoring. There was a presentation on long-term stability of Sjogren symptoms based on 4 subtypes, also referred to as the Newcastle Sjogren stratification tool. The subtypes were referred to as low symptom burden, high symptom burden, dryness dominant with fatigue, and pain dominant with fatigue. The findings showed a large portion of patients remained in the same subtype for at least 5 years, and also that the symptoms and subtypes were directly correlated to pathological changes, pathobiological changes, so blood, actually serum tests that they could monitor. So that was pretty interesting. The final presentation in this session was using ultrasound guided core needle biopsies of the parotid glands as a technique in the workup of Sjogren's disease. So the parotid glands, they're the big glands here on the sides of our face. Traditionally, a lip biopsy of the small salivary glands, so right underneath here, is usually performed, but unfortunately it's limited and it also can lead to sensory loss. So no one wants a numb lip. In some cases, actually open biopsy of the parotid gland is performed, and that's with a scalpel where they actually go in and surgically just open up. But obviously this is quite invasive, as you can imagine. So these researchers showed the advantages of using an ultrasound, so to actually see the gland, and then a needle to extract the cells out in order to identify what we call as lacrimal infiltrates, which can be used to identify Sjogren's. Additionally, this method was shown to identify cells of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma as well. In Sjogren's, there is a higher risk for that disease as well. So in conclusion, the needle biopsy was equivalent to the open surgical method with obviously less invasiveness. So let's switch gears, as I want to also report back on another session I watched. This one is called The Value of Multidisciplinary Team Care for People with RMDs, rheumatic and musculoskeletal diseases. There was a presentation and then a panel discussion between different health professionals, including a nurse, podiatrist, physiologist, social worker, and rheumatologist. It was really interesting to hear them speak about what was referred to as a person-centered approach. This can sometimes get lost in the busyness of medicine, but that's what we healthcare providers need to never forget. It's all about the patient and what we can do to help improve the quality of life of the patient. 3 key points of this process is partnership, which means meeting with at least 2 experts, patient stories, so listening to the patient, and documentation, so writing down written health plans so the patient doesn't have to keep repeating themselves and lets other providers also know what's going on. It's also important to keep everyone in the loop, right? So provider communication. And I'm sure most of us can say it's pretty frustrating when we have to keep repeating ourselves, our stories. In this model, patients are assisted in navigating the sometimes convoluted, crazy health system that we have, and having a case manager within the interdisciplinary team to coordinate care is also especially beneficial. Since the pandemic, we've embraced virtual connections, right? We're doing it right now, making it easier than ever for multiple experts to meet, even when they're in different cities or even different countries, okay? Along with the patient, caregiver, loved ones. Another important aspect that sometimes gets lost, and they mentioned it, was the aspect for support for the loved ones so that they understand, so they're given the knowledge to understand the patient situation. So in conclusion, making a tailored plan and a multidisciplinary approach has been proven to be very effective. Many medical institutions are looking to make this actually the norm in the future, and I'm hoping that since it was discussed at EULAR, that it's going to be implemented all over the place. That's all the time I have today. It's been a great day of learning, and I will see you back tomorrow for more. And thank you for watching. Bye-bye.